Chers auditeurs,
Dear listeners,
bonjour.
welcome to comdarchipodcast Season 5.
Saison 5, dans le monde fascinant des architectes.
And in the architectural projects.
Je suis Anne-Charlotte Deponte, passionnée d'architecture et docteur des universités en histoire de l'archi.
I am one of the spokespersons of Anne-Charlotte, who is a PhD in architecture history.
Merci
Thank you
d'être avec moi aujourd'hui.
to be with us today.
Et
And
maintenant,
now,
lundi en français, place au talent.
and Wednesday, let's talk projects. In English, of course.
Bienvenue dans Comme d'Archi.
Dear listeners, it's a pleasure to meet you today with the famous big and international Grimshaw Architecture Office. Hello, Kirsten Lees.
Hello, very nice to be here.
You're welcome here. And Alice Barrois.
Hey, hello.
Welcome to Comme d'Archi podcast. Kirsten, you are a partner of Grimshaw. And Alice, our listeners already know you. You are the principal of the French office. Your offices are based in London. The main office?
Well, I mean, we don't have a main office. We have a network of offices, actually, all over the world.
Yes.
Well, I think that sort of reflects our entrepreneurial, sort of adventurous spirit in terms of how we've expanded over the years.
Okay, so in France, of course. And in New York, Los Angeles, Auckland, Sydney, Melbourne, Dubai, a lot. Thank you very much for your presence for this remote Comme d'Archi interview. You are architects and your approach focuses on a lot of fields. I invite our listeners to listen to the podcast Season 5, Episode 23 and 24 with Alice. And we have good reasons to reinvite you with Kirsten because of the subject of sport equipment and the Olympic cities. But to begin with, a few strange questions for Kirsten. Do you enjoy the pleasures of the table? What are your favorite dishes? Do you have any special memories?
Well, who doesn't enjoy the pleasure of the table? I mean, I actually think it's one of the fantastic things about the role we've had as architects and working internationally is actually to be able to sample all of the wonderful dishes that there are all over the world. And it's so difficult to find a favourite. I suppose I spent many years living in Spain, so the freshness of Mediterranean food, I think it always holds a very special place in my heart.
Interesting. Okay. Kirsten, let's start at the beginning and take a look at your journey. How was your childhood and where did you desire for architecture take roots? Perhaps in your childhood? What did you study and when and how did you start your activity?
Wow, there's a lot of questions
Yes.
in there. So I'm originally from Scotland. I grew up in Edinburgh. Both my parents are artists. They were both art teachers. And I spent a lot of my childhood complaining about going to lots and lots of churches, lots of towns, lots of cities all over Europe. So I didn't first imagine architecture being my passion. And in fact, even when I completed school, I was still unsure as to what I wanted to do in the future. I had huge Rolodex of potential careers in mind. I was thinking about marine biology, architecture, industrial design, lots of different things. So to help me decide and to give me a bit more time, I actually decided to take a year out in the time when taking a year out wasn't the done thing. And I went to work in Barcelona for a year. And actually it was there that I think that I suppose I was really inspired. And that was when I decided to study architecture. A very close friend showed me the Mies van der Rohe pavilion, and I was just amazed at its modernity, its progressive thinking, especially when you look at that building and the Palau Nacional, which was built adjacent to it at exactly the same time, and the contrast between those two buildings. I mean, the Mies van der Rohe Pavilion today remains, a very special building. It still remains hugely modern, hugely contemporary, and yes, so that was my inspiration. So after that, I returned to Scotland and I studied at the Mackintosh School of Architecture in Glasgow.
Beautiful, yeah. Mm-hmm. How did you start your activity as an architect?
So, like all architects, I think it's a long course. So I did a lot of part-time work, both during the summer months as well as taking a year out, which is an important part of our formation and our development. Every single summer I would return to Spain, and I worked in Barcelona and I worked in Salamanca. I worked in Bilbao. I fully imagined that after completing my studies, that I would return to Spain. I did, I suppose, in some part return to Spain in that on completing my degree, one of the tutors actually invited me to come to London to work on a Spanish project. And that seemed to combine both my passion and potential career opportunities. So that was working at Stirling Wilford on the Banda project in Bilbao.
Okay, thank you. One of my recurrent questions in comdarchi is, do you feel today that you have accomplished what you imagined when you left school? It's a strange question.
It's a difficult question as well, because what your perspective is always shaped by your environment and the context at the time. And obviously, when I completed my studies, my context at that time was very different to what I've experienced through over 25 and counting years of working as an architect, working professionally. I had a bit of an existential moment the other day, whereas actually I was at a conference in Glasgow and the opening drinks were in my old studio. So walking through the door at the Bourdon building, in the ugliest building adjacent to what was then the Mackintosh School of Architecture adjacent to that. Unfortunately burned down now twice. Definitely brought a lot of memories flooding back. I suppose when you complete and finish university, everything is possible, and very much the world is your oyster. And I think in terms of what I've done since, I think I've been hugely honoured and had a fantastic opportunity to work on some amazing projects with some fantastic and really talented teams and brilliant clients, genuinely all over the world. So I didn't imagine that, and I have to say it's been great.
Okay, wonderful. Can you tell us now about your approach and work for your sports project? Your emblematic and current projects about sports?
So regarding sports projects, I think we approach them in exactly the same way approach all architecture. I think it's really important, and I think potentially there are sometimes too much focus with sports projects on the field of play. And we think it's really important that sports building, obviously have to resolve all of the technical requirements about how the field of play works, whether it's whatever form of sport building you're looking at. But sports buildings as well have to work within their context. They have to work for their cities. In many ways, they're the type of building that, have this fantastic and amazing ability to really capture people's imagination and bring huge numbers of people together in a in that wonderful buzz of people gathering. So they have a really important role, I think, to play in today's society. And I think sports buildings also have an important role in responding to that need, but also responding to their cities and to their environments. Sometimes, and certainly historically, some sports buildings tend to be very inward-looking and potentially as well tend to be out with cities. And we think that actually today buildings are much more multi-purpose in their use. And therefore, these types of buildings need to work a lot harder than potentially they have in the past. My first introduction to sports buildings was we had the real honour of working with the All England club at Wimbledon. Mm. We were responsible, we worked with them.
It's the first project about sports?
It's not Grimshaw's first project. Grimshaw's first project in sports project was actually the grandstand at Lord's. That was a project that was run by one of my partners. I wasn't involved in it, and I think it's stood the test of time very well, and sits within, I suppose, the pavilions, which is very much the ethos that Lord's have developed in terms of a series of cricket pavilions around Lord's grandstand.
So you have 2 examples of aquatic centre in Australia, in Parramatta?
We do.
Yes. Actually, it's a little perhaps complicated with the sustainability.
Yeah, I can talk about them. They're not well, obviously I can describe the projects, but we're, I'm not as close to those projects as some of the other sports projects that I've run from London. I think Parramatta is a fantastic example, I think, of actually looking at the whole setting of creating a sports project, one which is very much for the community, one for the city. It considers its setting, it considers its relationship to the sky, it considers its relationship to the people, and also this fantastic thing of building expectation in terms of arrival. And what I think is really lovely about the conceptual idea for Parramatta is it creates its own world. It's a pure circle created from a landscape whereby the external pool is open to the sky, but it's created its own world within the pool area itself.
Thank you. And how are the Grimshaw teams structured for this type of project?
The way that we approach all of our projects, I think, is exactly the same. Obviously, there's differences in scale. Yeah. We think it's really, really important that a team is consistent from as far as possible, the beginning to the end, particularly at that early formation and that engagement with the client, the understanding of the requirements, understanding of the brief, how that evolves and develops as the design emerges. So we always have essentially a team which is fully resourced to the project, 100%, and that allows for that dedication of time, the evolution of just attending to all of the myriad different requirements that any project needs. As you move through the stages, that team can grow or contract, but the core team remains a constant throughout the process. And that for us is important because it enables the ideas, the concepts that run through the essence of the project from start to finish, never to be diluted.
Okay, thank you. And now, what is your vision of the Olympic City, and how did you come to think about it?
So I think, and I've had the real pleasure of actually living in 3 Olympic cities and witnessing the build-up I think it's always a bit of an emotional build-up, and sometimes cities can find them challenging projects, as well as being fantastic opportunities to showcase their city. I think one of the great things that I've seen is that even if there's concerns about the impact that all of this huge influx of visitors can have on a city, that during the actual games themselves, it brings out a fantastic spirit of camaraderie, of pride in your city, pride in hosting, as well as a fantastic belief in what the games stand for, which is all about, actually fairness, celebrating others and celebrating the sport.
Yes, and about the question of mobility.
Yes, so I think every city, the way that they respond to Olympic Games, I think very often is a reflection on the major concerns of that time. And I think that what cities, and what the Olympic Authority have been looking at is actually how to bring the Games forward, I think, over time in a much more sustainable way. I think if initially the Games can be often symbolised by fantastic, grand, exuberant, extrovert, large pieces of architecture, I think now it's been come to recognise the expense of that investment, and that the legacy of some of those brilliant buildings has undermined maybe their original intention, because there hasn't been a sort of long-term use for those buildings. So I think there has been a transition. Barcelona, I think, was one of the first to start that off in terms of actually looking at the regeneration of the city as part of the hosting of the Games. And I think at Paris, what's really interesting is that actually the move away from building new buildings to adapting existing buildings, as well as adapting the public realm, using temporary buildings, and really thinking of the Games more sustainably, but also more democratically, opening them out really and opening the city out as almost the backdrop to the Games and to the brand.
Yes, we cross our fingers for this edition. Alice, do you want to ask a question, perhaps, yourself?
Maybe, something I'd like to know is what will be your most the project, the sport project that to you is the most emblematic, or something that you've done, and why? Is it in terms of the design? Is it the kind of client relation that you build up? What's the thing that to you is the most interesting thing for you?
As a sports building
Yes.
that I've done?
Yes.
That's a difficult one, because I think the best building that you're working on is always the one that you're working on at the moment. I think I'm really proud, actually, of a lot of the sports buildings we've done, because the client has been very deliberate in coming to us because of our approach from that outside in as well as inside out approach. So at Curragh, what we were looking to do, which is a racecourse, was really respond to beautiful setting. And similarly at Stadium for Bath, the site for the Bath Rugby is right at the heart of a World Heritage city, right in front of the main cathedral. And what we wanted to do with that project was give it a life beyond the sports facility itself, beyond the rugby, which is very important though it is, but actually create a setting whereby the stadium could be used, all year round, by using the facilities that were created for the city, using the grandstand to create a food hall, and also using the stadium also looks out onto the Rec, which is an open ground, to actually support community facilities and community use of the changing areas to support younger people in Bath.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. What advice would you give to architecture students today?
Advice I think I give is to believe in yourself, go with your gut, and really focus on the specifics of the project. There's so many influences, there's so many images out there that I think it's really important that projects emerge from their specific circumstances.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And about sport, perhaps?
Always to focus on the sport.
Okay. And last word to conclude?
Well, I think sports projects need to do more for their cities, more for their sport, and more for the communities that use them.
Okay. Alice, something else?
Well, one other thing we can say is a lot of sport projects trying to show off a lot, and sometimes the architecture and the project needs to be a little bit more quiet and let the sports and the cities talk for themselves to create a better balance and to be a bit more integrated.
Thank you very much. And dear listeners, thank you for tuning in. Let's meet again for next week for a new comdarchi in English. And until then, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.
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 Thank you for listening. And thanks to the sound engineer who was collaborating with us today. Don't forget to tune in to our previews on Instagram at comdarchipodcast. If you enjoy this podcast, don't hesitate to promote it by giving it 5 stars and a little comment on Apple Podcast or on your favorite podcast platform. And above all, subscribe to listen to all of our episodes for free. See you soon, and until then, take care of yourself.